your host, Sean Lynn, in the pub for a Dram with friends, where we talk about faith, family, food, and fun. Pull up a chair and I'll pour you a drink. Episode 51. We welcome our good friend Sean Blair into the pub. Catholic convert and father of a large family, shares his journey as we share a drink. I hope you are enjoying this content. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend. Also, go to godsquad.ca where you can pray with us and for us, and consider donating so that we can continue our mission, reaching men wherever they're at. Thank you as we begin our episode. Welcome, and we are extremely excited to welcome Sean to the pub. Sean Blair is a former board member with God Squad Canada, father of 10, and him and I both share the same birthday. So we've got lots in common. He had to have a couple more kids just so he beat me, because he wanted to be the stronger Sean or whatever, but I'm still the older Sean. So welcome, Sean Blair.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm gonna, because you're not a big whiskey drinker, and the Irish whiskeys tend to be something more approachable, easier to start with. And this is one that I bought because they didn't have my Glendalough at the time, and we were going to a retirement for a teacher, or he was moving to a different place, and everybody quite enjoyed it. So
Nice. Well,
this I hope you enjoy.
I've been exploring other foods and other drinks as of late. Trying different things. So
There you go.
it's a good opportunity.
West Cork blended Irish whiskey.
I'm not sure why I didn't get more into Scotch and whiskey, because my dad was a consistent Scotch drinker. He'd always come home and have about that much every day after he'd come home from work. So I don't know.
So what you're saying is I should have your dad over to the pub?
Yeah, yeah, he'd be happy to sample a few, I'm sure.
Or would I get him to leave the pub?
Exactly, yeah.
So,
well, cheers.
Cheers. So for our friends in the pub, who is Sean Blair?
Well, probably best to in terms of my history, I'm a convert, which I know share with many people you've spoken to on the show, and I mean even Jeff and others who you've worked with regularly, and so I'm a convert to the Catholic Church. I grew up as a staunch evangelical for many years, and through many different influences and things through the years, which I mean we might talk about later, but eventually came to the fullness of the Catholic Church, and got brought in Easter of '98, and my wife and I, my girlfriend at the time, joined the church at the same time, and we went through a little period of trying to figure out, am I going to become a priest? Is she looking at just kind of really just looking at the whole new spectrum of potential possibilities when you walk into the church and see what's there, because always maintain that the Catholic Church is way bigger on the inside than it looks like from the outside, and so little year of discernment there, but eventually decided to get married in '99, and here we are 10 children later, and always looking to delve deeper and into the richness that is our faith. So that's I guess a quick summary, and brought as far as my connection to the God Squad, had always had an interest in technical and video and other aspects and photography, and so got involved through that route with the God Squad team and helped with conferences for quite a number of years. And yeah, definitely enjoyed my time there
And
and learning and
there's always
exploring.
a
So
place for you still. We understand having 10 children as the
yes,
family continued to grow, that the demands on one's life tend to grow.
yes, no,
So I'm at the tail end of that, as you
yeah,
know. My youngest is in grade 11, but there still has lots of demands on dad's time with kids as they're in university and Satan. So
yeah,
it
yeah,
never ends being a dad.
absolutely, yeah.
So
Yeah, and
we,
and she is best friends with my third oldest, so
yes,
you can kind of, I'm still in the right in the smack dab in the middle of
yeah,
it. So
yes. Well, and your oldest is friends with the one that is over in Ireland, and yes,
yes, of
we've
course.
been. I'm not sure if it was our kids that were friends first, but we've been friends for a long time.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah.
And I didn't realize it was 1998 that you came in, because that was the year of our very first God Squad conference,
And
was that March.
I believe, well, if it was then March, then that means the first conference that I attended was your second one, and I believe you were still over at the Red and White Club
That
at your
yeah, so
second
we
one
did
there.
2 years at the Red and White Club.
Yeah.
The very first one was in a hotel in Northeast Calgary. So
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I joined you guys there and was and I believe Tim was there speaking, and yeah, it was an amazing introduction to dive right into the richness of our faith and to be able to explore it from a man's perspective in that way was awesome. Was awesome. So
well, and when he's speaking of Tim, it's Tim Gray, and
Tim Gray, yeah.
he was a young professor at the time,
Hmm.
not really overly well known. We had met him uh, on the Jeff Cavins show, Life on the Rock, down in Alabama, and said, "Hey, do you want to speak at our next conference?"
Yeah.
And that's how that came to be.
And
And we,
he did a phenomenal job, and I would say he did a really good job of for me putting into words what I was beginning to explore or understand in that transition of from my Protestant sort of upbringing and to becoming Catholic. And I would say it really pivoted around the concept of virtue. Like literally the word virtue I had not heard used in any sort of practical application at all until that conference. And then of course throughout my growing into the Catholic Church, I've come to cherish that for sure. But you always you always were sort of expected to understand, through learning and Bible training, etc., that this is the way you are to live. And there was just sort of an unwritten written expectation in some cases that you got to figure out how to live in victory, right? Live victoriously, live into and call on God to help and all of those things. But you never were really given the tools as a human being in terms of how do I do that effectively and how do I win those battles, and that Tim really laid down that map about how it is habit, and I still actually remember the analogy he talked about, the $20 bill laying on the table, and it's the virtuous man doesn't even wrestle with, do I pick that up and pocket it. It was that thought never entered their mind, but it only got to that point because they had so habitually been in that habit, the habit of doing good and the right and the true, and so that would just blew my mind. So it was a very timely moment to have that conference happen in my life for sure.
wow,
Yeah.
and that's what we talk about, just whether that was the one person at that conference that we made a difference in. We know that there was others because we got different letters and over the years, but just knowing that we made a difference in one person's life, which then translate into a difference in that family's life, which
Hmm.
then translate into that community's life.
Yeah.
Because your family with 10 kids, who knows where that will go, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
As that continues to build and flourish. And I know all of your kids, they're very faithful, they love the church, and so who knows what God's got planned for them. So that's where the exciting part of this journey is I remember back then Steve Wood talking about uh, Promise Keepers was very big, and you wanted to make, feel the love of God and the altar calls and everything else. And but Steve Wood talked about, we don't want to make a difference in your life today. We want to make a difference in your grandchild's life
Hmm.
by you being here.
Hmm.
And that really stuck with me. And I got to go watch my grandson play football over the weekend,
Nice. Yeah.
and that's where it's so rewarding to start seeing those fruits. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and seeing, and I think, this, I think it's both a, it's certainly a difficulty that, the times we're living in right now in terms of some of the challenges we're coming up against, with, you know, just the challenges of dealing with the COVID situation and the, mandates and other things that we're wrestling with our consciences, wrestling with these things, saying, what is the good, the right, the true? Like, how is the best way to be interacting with my neighbor? The bigger concept of neighbor, and seeing. I agree with you in that some of the most fulfilling moments are seeing your children wrestle with that and come to their own conclusions and see that they're choosing God and choosing the right path in that sense. And not to say that you have exactly this exact map in your mind of, oh, this is exactly where they go. Because there is a point, and I think it comes earlier than most people think, where you have to let go. You have to let them own those decisions for themselves. But seeing that the foundation has been laid and know that, it's by the grace of God, because I look at the things that how I've tried to parent and be a good husband and all those things, and you're like, there is no way that if I hadn't been praying about it and laying it at God's feet through those many years, that it wouldn't have come out this way. And I mean, there's still a long way to go, but at the end of the day, that idea of what is my role as a husband and a father, and it's about getting my children and my spouse to the gates of the kingdom, right? And that at the end of the day, that will be the proof in the pudding. So,
well, and that's where it's interesting. Yeah, we used to have a poster. We don't believe in miracles, we rely on them. And with a large family, yeah, there's lots of times, whether it's on vacation or paying for this or that. Like my older son, there wasn't an all-star team he didn't make,
mm-hmm.
and you're trying to, but God seems to look after us no matter what. And yeah, you get a rebate from the gas company or something. You're going, they don't give rebates.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, and that's where it's been quite the journey. I tell people, because I'm now in my 33rd year of policing, that it'll be, I'm going to make that 90-year-old guy in the States look like a quitter, because I don't think retirement's in my vocabulary with a
Yeah,
large family.
yeah.
So
I've always said that I'm on the Freedom 95 plan or something like that. Yeah,
yeah, so but the joys that it brings, you can't like you tell people when you have 10 kids, well, which one do I give back, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
so it's because they are all unique, special gifts from God, and helping them realize that sometimes is difficult.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, and it's, you know, people, you know, when people come to find out how many kids you have or whatever, I think especially younger parents who have, like, let's say they have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. They're in their minds, they immediately go to, if I had 10 of those at home all at the same time, I would completely lose my mind, right? But then you
Yeah.
have to kind of bring them along and say, well, no, I have a 20-year-old at home who, you know, going through university right now, and I also have a, you know, almost 2-year-old, and the dynamics playing out there in terms of that whole range. And you know, I often there's a, I don't know, can't remember the study. I just remember reading this statement just saying from a growth of your, you know, the formation of your personality, especially in your younger years, although your parents have a strong play in that, that your siblings actually have an even stronger impact in terms of who you become as a person. And I thought that was really interesting, and say, so it becomes even more important that you're able to set them on the path, or, you know, in terms of formation, where they have made those decisions for themselves and own those decisions for themselves, because they're going to turn around, especially the older ones influencing the younger ones, about what path that they may take, because they're looking up to them, they're watching their
Yeah.
every move. So
Well, and that's where, like, especially our older kids, there was opportunity for them to go to youth conferences, and we've encouraged that. And they go and make the faith their own. It's not something that mom and dad is like forcing on them. They go and make the faith their own, because it's their faith. We hope that we instill the enough that they choose the right faith. But and that's where it's so important to encourage them to take part in some of these different opportunities to go and and meet people of their age in their faith that are sharing the faith, because they want to know that they're not alone in this.
and I would say that piece has been some of the biggest part of the struggle over this past couple of years, with the church understandably having to take a more cautious approach to things, really having to shut down a lot of those activities. And so, you know, I mean, obviously kids, if they're driven, they're going to find creative ways of, you know, still sharing those things. And I've seen a lot of, you know, Zoom based and, you know, call stuff of, so with some of the youth programs out of the, you know, Saskatchewan diocese and those kind of things. You know, I'd love to see a little bit more of that happen in Alberta. Obviously, we'll just need to keep encouraging them, but you know, they found creative ways around these things to continue sharing those aspects of faith. And I, yeah, it's absolutely those young adults continuing to live into that is so impactful to the teens coming up into that, where they're starting to make some of those critical decisions. So yeah. No.
So, being a father of 10, I know that you need to help out around the house a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So, I know that you're not afraid to go in the kitchen. Is there a dish that the kids love dad making, or
Well, well, burgers and fries will always
win the day?
win the day, and that's our Saturday meal. But what's interesting, we've been going to mass in the evenings. You know, as you knew, we were you know, myself and members, a couple of the girls in the family were in the choir at the church there, but we were always at the 5 o'clock mass in the evening. We've continued going to you know, a later mass in the day, so that sort of normal thing where, oh, it's the big Sunday roast dinner, sit down, that doesn't really happen in our house. We have slightly different traditions, but as a result, it's been brunch. Sunday brunch is the thing. So I would say I don't vary the menu too much, but that's been Dad's sort of consistent contribution. And you know, waking up, getting to sleep in and wake up at, you know, around 11 o'clock to the smell of pancakes, and coming down I think everybody has appreciated that. So that I'd say that's my big
Well,
contribution.
and those are things that you can do for your families is creating those little traditions that they will look back on fondly,
Absolutely.
and they'll smell pancakes and it'll take them right back
Yeah.
to dad making pancakes for us on Sundays. And I know my older kids, I used to do pancakes on Saturday mornings back when we had Saturday morning cartoons, and
Right.
that was a big thing. I've got some sourdough that my dad has started many years ago. So my sourdough is about 40 years old. So
Nice.
I make some nice sourdough pancakes, and it's those things that do make loving memories for the kids and lasting memories that I think you hit nailed on the head. Whether it's we always went to mass at 5 in the afternoon, or one of the traditions both of our families have is Easter Vigil. We always go to the Easter Vigil, and there's a couple of years I didn't want to go, and my kids are going, no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, no, we are going, Dad.
we're
Yeah.
going, Dad.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
it's a 3 hour mass, but my kids love it.
Yeah.
So, and because that's part of that tradition, right?
Yeah.
So,
No, yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think, one of the things that I also wanted to mention too, in that I would say, especially, not to say that we shouldn't be having those important conversations along the way where you're calling out specific things from a faith perspective, or from a Bible passage perspective, opportunities for those teaching. But I would say the more consistent thread of how we lead our families is in our example, what we spend our time on, what we show through our example to be important to us. And I really wanted to share this, and I've spoken about this a couple times with various people, but through this whole COVID situation, especially as the church shifted to, as many of the bishops have said, they've done away with the Sunday obligation, right? I'm not really sure how we come back from that. That's a whole other conversation. But
we got lots of work to do
we've got a lot of work to do there. But
in the vineyard.
yeah, exactly. But I observed that some families that I knew, whether they were very, very close or just kind of, we knew them as peers or people that we saw at mass at a regular basis, that for whatever reason that it's no longer a regular thing anymore. And there were, not to say there wasn't difficulties in trying to get in there. There was a period of time here in Alberta where we literally couldn't go into the church, right? And those were difficult times. But the moment it opened up, regardless of the struggle around scheduling and other things, there is a space for us at the table, and God wants us there. And as the leaders of our family, the heads of our families, we need to show that to be a priority. Yes, the bishops have said that maybe that's not, absolutely obligated, but if you want, especially when your children are in that younger stages, they got to see that this is important enough for our family and for my father that we show up there every Sunday, right? And I guess encourage that, like you said, like the 3 hour, 3 hour mass, but even like oh man, I gotta get up, I gotta get, dressed nicely, I gotta get everybody organized, I gotta get out the door, and on top of that, I have to make sure I book it the week ahead of time and schedule it. Yeah, you do. It's just, you gotta do it, because you gotta make sure that your family knows it's important to you, important enough to make it and show it up.
So if he could do it with 10 kids, little ones, I think is what he's saying is, if you're using the excuse that you got a little one, it's not a good excuse, because it's one of those things that, like you say, they need to see it and they need to be part of it, because unless they see it and are part of it, how do they ever get trained in it behave there, and like it's a whole vicious cycle, and if you take that out. But I honestly believe that there's going to be a big harvest here of that we need to go and invite people,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
the emptiness, the loneliness of COVID, they're wanting to find that connection. They're looking for God. You look at the Bible in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, which I don't know where it is now, but when I looked mid-year, it was like still the number 14 podcast out of all podcasts.
It hit number one for a while.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was number
yeah.
one back in January and February, and it was right behind the Ben Shapiro show when I looked, and
Mm-hmm.
it was ahead of Joe Rogan. Like, these are big names in the
Mm-hmm.
podcast world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that hunger there,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and we're going to have to be ready to welcome them into the church. And I hope and pray that our churches are ready for that, that they're ready to open the doors wide and welcome these people in, so that they do sit at the banquet, like you say,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
heavenly banquet that we get to witness every Sunday or every day. For those that, my wife is much better than me. She goes daily, so I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress still.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Me too. Me too.
uh, so one of the things I ask my guests
Mm-hmm.
is, a lot of young men are struggling with what even a man is. What advice do you give your 18-year-old self?
Oh. um, that's a good question.
That's why I ask it.
Yeah. I would say take to heart Pope John Paul's, ever so short but effective message of "Be not afraid." And I think it's even more critical for the times we live in right now. Any decision made in fear, be it fear of dying, fear of of being called out for speaking the truth, fear of stepping forward and being courageous in terms of challenging somebody at work who's not behaving in a way that's appropriate, stuff like that you have the courage to be able to step up and say, look, this is wrong, or here is, or just even the courage, like we were talking about, by living by example, the courage to live by that example. And you talk about being ready to invite people back. I think laying out that example of living without fear, and I think in the COVID situation, I would say that the more we can walk through life with that sense of eternity behind us, right? Like, and that's something I've kind of either being asking priests, or when I'm talking to friends and other people, I always kind of ask the question, and and I get different answers all the time, but I think this time that we're living through right now is so, it's shining a light into so many different areas, both internally in our own souls, but also in terms of society, and saying, look, if we truly believe that God says who he is, that he is who he says he is, we should have no fear, because this life is not all there is to it. This is only the beginning, right? And so I guess going back to your question, my advice back to my younger self would be just that. Be courageous in living virtuously, regardless of what those outcomes that you fear might be there. Because by living in that courage, and I would say virtue being a key part of that, you're putting yourself in the hands of God every day, every moment. and you're living by His mercy, and I'm I'm definitely seeing that more and more, that is really the best way forward through all of this, all of the things that we're struggling with in society, etc., is living in that space.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other segments is you know Jeff Cavins, you've met him a few times with us, and in his Activated Disciple, he talks about riding with your posse. So who are your go-to saints? Who are the ones that you call on often?
Well, St. Joseph, absolutely. Like, he's the first one who I'm asking to pray for me at the end of any prayer. Just in terms of his, strong, silent, courageous example, right? And I, it's exactly that. Like, just kind of like what we've been talking about. There is the epitome of a guy who led by example, right? You don't have a single word recorded in Scripture from the guy, but just what he did and his willingness to act when God said go.
Yeah.
And that's huge. So, yeah, absolutely. He's number one. Pope John Paul II, absolutely. John Paul the Great is definitely up there in terms of, just that, like his courageousness in the face of, in his day, in terms of communism and what he was dealing with there, the challenges of him being the only one left in his family, at an early age, but yeah, just a lot of the cultural shifts going on at the time that he was very steadfast against, or holding the line against, it was absolutely huge for me too. And on the courage side of things, Saint Michael is also, he's definitely he's sort of at the front of the posse. He takes the brunt of things and moves things aside where necessary. And I would say more and more, we're calling on him, not only myself individually, but as a family. Like that prayer of Saint Michael is at the end of all of our prayers every day. And we pray a quick decade driving into school. Like, thank goodness the drive is only 5 minutes in terms of because we're often scrambling so late out the door. It's just the way it is. But to be able to get a decade, but we always have Saint Michael at the end of that decade, because he just putting it in his hands for the day and just saying, just have this image of him sort of just clearing the path for us in the front, and then just say, and quite honestly, like temptations and struggles come in, just having that prayer ready at the go, and how he calms that internal storm when things when Satan's messing with your mind. It's amazing. So yeah, I would say those are my three in my posse there. So.
And I think they're in mine as well. And you talk about Saint Michael, and one of the names of Saint Joseph is I come to love to walk alongside Saint Michael. Saint Joseph, terror of demons. Like it's just so now I've got two guys out front clearing the way, and they do. So thank you so much for joining us in the pub, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if
pleasure.
you know, but the Gaelic word for whiskey, the origin of the word whiskey comes from a Gaelic term called Ishkabaha, which means water of life. And I pray that you and I continue to lead many souls to the true water of life.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I hope you have enjoyed this episode of A Dram with Friends. Like and subscribe. Go to all podcast platforms to look for it on podcast, or go to godsquad.ca to support our mission.